from the start. A narcissist does not see you the way you see yourself, or even the way a healthy person sees others. When a narcissist looks at you, they're not seeing a whole human being. They're not thinking in terms of mutual respect, shared experience, or even individual uniqueness. No. What they're seeing is a utility, a function, a means to an end. And once you grasp this shift in perception, everything else starts to make sense. Narcissism, from a psychological perspective, is rooted in a deep, unresolved deficit of the self. It's not merely vanity or arrogance. That's a common misconception. It's a fragile, unstable internal world that needs constant reinforcement from the outside. That's why the narcissist doesn't engage in relationships in the normal sense. Their primary concern isn't connection, it's extraction. They are fundamentally oriented toward gaining something from you. Admiration, attention, status, emotional energy, even chaos. Anything that reinforces their sense of importance or superiority. And here's the disturbing part. They don't always do this consciously. It's not necessarily a calculated strategy. It's more like a default mode of being. Narcissists are often blind to their own motivations. They can genuinely believe they care about you, even love you, but their behavior reveals something else entirely. When your usefulness runs out, when you stop feeding their ego, they discard you, sometimes cruelly, as if you never mattered at all. That contradiction between their words and their actions is not a bug in the system, it's the system itself. Think about how this plays out in real life. Maybe you've experienced it. At first, the narcissist is incredibly charming, attentive, even admiring. You might feel seen in a way you never have before, but that's not genuine recognition. That's idealization. It's the pedestal phase, and it's not about you, it's about what you represent to them. You're a shiny object, a new source of narcissistic supply. Eventually, when your imperfections show, or when you stop reflecting their greatness back at them, the mask slips. The admiration turns to criticism, the connection to control. Then you might ask yourself, why did they change? The painful truth is they didn't. You just stopped being useful. It's a harsh realization, but an important one. Because once you understand that narcissists don't truly see you, they see what you can do for them, you stop taking their treatment of you personally. You begin to protect your value not by proving it to them, but by refusing to offer it up to people who see you as a mirror rather than a person. We live in a culture that often rewards narcissism, flash over substance, performance over integrity, and that makes it all the more essential to recognize when you're being used as a prop in someone else's performance. This isn't just a relationship issue, it's a psychological survival skill. Here's the bottom line. If someone only sees you as a tool, the moment you stop functioning for them is the moment they stop seeing you altogether. So be very careful who you allow to see you, because some people are only looking for their reflection. You said, one of the most paradoxical and psychologically revealing truths about narcissists is that they're not drawn to weakness, they're drawn to strength. Your competence, your emotional depth, your creativity, your confidence, these are not invisible to them. On the contrary, they notice those traits immediately. But rather than responding with admiration or respect, what they feel is envy. And envy, unlike jealousy, doesn't just want what you have, it wants to spoil what you have. It wants to diminish it, devalue it, distort it, or destroy it. This is where it gets particularly insidious. Narcissists are not just insecure. They're chronically threatened by any attribute in you that highlights what they lack in themselves. If you're naturally warm and empathic, that reminds them of their emotional shallowness. If you're accomplished or skilled, that reflects back their internal mediocrity. If you're resilient, grounded, or at peace with yourself, that stands in stark contrast to the chaos they carry around internally. Your very existence becomes a psychological affront, and yet they won't say that. They won't come out and admit, you make me feel inadequate. That would require a level of self-awareness and humility they rarely possess. Instead, they'll chip away at you quietly, strategically. They'll disguise criticism as concern. They'll mock you under the pretense of humor. They'll find subtle ways to question your decisions, your intelligence, your appearance, your worth, not because they believe you're lesser, but because they fear that you're greater. And if they can't rise to meet you, they'll try to drag you down to meet them. This behavior isn't accidental, it's archetypal. We see it in mythology, in literature, in religious texts. Cain doesn't just resent Abel's favor with God, he murders him. The pattern is ancient. When someone feels fundamentally inferior, they'll often lash out, not at their own limitations, but at those who reveal them. Now here's where this really matters for you. Many people on the receiving end of this treatment start to internalize it. They begin to question their own gifts. They dull their shine so as not to provoke resentment. They shrink themselves, thinking, maybe I am too much. But that's exactly what the narcissist wants. To collapse your strength so they can feel tall beside your ruins. You can't afford to play into that dynamic. Because once you start dimming your light to soothe someone else's shadows, you've already begun to lose yourself. And worse, you've handed over control of your self-concept to the very person who least deserves it. So what's the alternative? It's not arrogance, it's not retaliation, it's clarity. You have to recognize that your strengths will always trigger the insecurities of those unwilling to confront their own inadequacies. So that's not your fault. And it's not your responsibility to fix. Your responsibility is to protect what's good in you from those who would rather see it destroyed than celebrated. Because here's the reality. When someone resents your light, it's not a sign you should hide it. It's a sign you need to stand in it more fully and walk away from those who can't bear the sight. He said, when dealing with a narcissist, one of the most jarring realizations is this. Your value to them is not intrinsic, it's transactional. You're not appreciated for who you are, but for what you provide. This could be emotional validation, social status, financial support, or even just the appearance of loyalty. And the moment that supply dries up, or is perceived to be less useful, they begin to pull away, criticize, or discard you entirely. Now that's not how healthy relationships operate. In a functional mutual relationship, you are valued as a whole person, not a vending machine for someone's ego. But the narcissist's worldview is fundamentally utilitarian. People are reduced to functions, roles in their psychological economy. You're the helper, the admirer, the trophy, the fixer, the scapegoat. And when your function no longer meets their ever-shifting needs, they move on, or worse, they retaliate. This isn't a rare exception in narcissistic behavior, it's the rule. And it stems from a deep philosophical and psychological deficit. Because at the core of the narcissistic personality is a void, a lack of stable identity. Their sense of self isn't self-generated. It has to be constructed externally through control, consumption, and comparison. They survive by mining others for worth, and when you stop yielding what they want, they feel slighted, even betrayed, because they were never in it for the connection. They were in it for the extraction. What's particularly dangerous is that narcissists are often quite charming at the outset. They're skilled at mimicry. They study what others value and reflect it back. So at first they appear attentive, even supportive. But it's not genuine altruism. It's a form of strategic investment. You're being groomed, often unconsciously, to play a part in their personal mythology, one where they're always at the center and others orbit around them. Over time, the signs start to show. Maybe you begin to feel unappreciated, constantly criticized, or emotionally drained. You might notice that whenever you assert your own needs or boundaries, it's met with hostility or withdrawal. That's because you've stopped being purely useful. You've started becoming autonomous. And for a narcissist, that's intolerable, because autonomy disrupts control. This dynamic is not just emotionally exhausting, it's spiritually corrosive. It conditions you to believe that your worth is dependent on performance, that love is earned through sacrifice, and that boundaries are punishable. Many people trapped in these dynamics begin to internalize the belief that their value is conditional. And that belief can follow them for years, even long after the narcissist is gone. So the work here is not just to recognize the pattern, it's to reject the premise. You are not valuable because you're useful, you are valuable because you are, full stop. Relationships built on mutual respect, not exploitation, will never demand that you trade your dignity for proximity. Here's what it comes down to. If someone only shows up when they need something, they're not showing up for you, they're showing up for them. And the most powerful thing you can do is stop confusing attention with care and usefulness with love. He said there's a strange contradiction at the heart of narcissism, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. On the surface, narcissists project confidence, even superiority. They carry themselves like they've got it all figured out. They talk as though they're always right, always the authority, always the most important person in the room. But underneath that surface bravado, something very different is happening. What you're actually dealing with is a deep, persistent fear of being exposed, of being revealed as inadequate, unremarkable, or even fundamentally unlovable. And this is not a surface level insecurity, it's existential. It's rooted in the very structure of the narcissist's identity, which, if you look closely, is not built on genuine self-acknowledge or internal stability. It's a patchwork of personas, images, and performances designed to mask the truth they refuse to confront. They don't really know who they are without the validation of others. This fear of exposure drives much of the manipulative and controlling behavior you see in narcissists. Think about it. If your entire sense of self is contingent on being seen as special, superior, or flawless, then anyone who threatens that image, whether intentionally or not, becomes a danger. And danger to the narcissist must be neutralized. So if you start asking tough questions, setting boundaries, or pointing out inconsistencies, don't be surprised when the narcissist lashes out or pulls away. You're not just challenging their opinion, you're threatening the fragile scaffolding that holds their identity together. This is why criticism, even when it's constructive or mild, is taken as a personal attack. Why disagreement is met not with curiosity, but with defensiveness or rage. But here's where it gets more complex. The narcissist doesn't just fear being exposed by you, they also envy your ability to be real, to be imperfect and still secure, to be honest about your limitations without falling apart. That kind of psychological resilience is foreign to them, and it stings. It reminds them of what they lack, an internal anchor. And so in response, they may mock your vulnerability, dismiss your emotions, or accuse you of being weak. But those reactions are projections. They're not about you. They're a distorted mirror of their own disowned shame. Because deep down, they fear that if they ever stopped performing, if they ever stopped curating the image, there would be nothing of substance left. Just a hollow space where the self was supposed to be. This fear shapes everything. It's why narcissists surround themselves with people who don't challenge them. It's why they can't tolerate true intimacy, which requires openness and risk. And it's why they often sabotage relationships that get too close. Because closeness exposes, and exposure is intolerable. So, if you've ever wondered why a narcissist seems so threatened by your honesty, your clarity, or your confidence, this is why. You didn't do anything wrong. You just reminded them of what they're spending their entire lives trying to avoid. And that's the paradox. The person who seems most in control is often the most afraid of being truly seen. So if someone resents you for being real, it's not a cue to shrink. It's a sign that your authenticity holds a kind of power they've never learned to claim for themselves. You said, one of the most overlooked and yet profoundly telling behaviors of a narcissist is their obsession with keeping score. Now, I don't mean in the simple sense of remembering who did what in a relationship. That's normal. We all keep mental accounts to some extent. But the narcissist turns this into a psychological war of accounting. Every interaction becomes a transaction. Every favor given is a debt owed. Every mistake you make is logged and stored like ammunition to be used later when it serves their advantage. This isn't generosity, it's strategy. Because for the narcissist, life is a hierarchy, and relationships are arenas of domination. If they can position themselves above you, morally, socially, intellectually, they feel safer. So they're always calculating. Not just how much they've given, but how much more they've given than you. Not just what you've done wrong, but how often they can remind you of it to maintain leverage. It's not about fairness, it's about control. And here's what's particularly deceptive. They often do this under the guise of righteousness. They'll claim they're just being fair or that they never forget how people treat them. But what's really happening is a subtle but relentless campaign to secure moral superiority. Because if they can cast themselves as the more giving, more loyal, more wronged party, then they can justify almost any behavior. Manipulation becomes self-defense. Punishment becomes justice. That's how they see it. You might find yourself constantly trying to make up for something, some slight, some failing, some moment when you didn't respond fast enough or show enough appreciation. The narcissist will exploit that uncertainty because it gives them the upper hand. And once they have that, they won't easily let it go. It becomes the foundation for the power imbalance that defines the relationship. But here's the deeper issue. This kind of mental scorekeeping is a sign that they're not really with you, they're not emotionally present, they're not operating from a place of genuine care or mutual growth. They're watching you like an opponent, evaluating, comparing, strategizing. In other words, they're not playing with you, they're playing against you. And you might not even know there's a game going on. Now, that can do serious damage over time. Because it makes you doubt yourself, it makes you feel perpetually behind, never enough, never safe. And if you're a conscientious person, that's especially dangerous. Because you'll try harder. You'll give more, you'll internalize their dissatisfaction and take on the burden of constantly earning back their affection. But that's the trap. You can't win a game you didn't agree to play. And the more you try to play fair with someone who's keeping score to win, not to connect, the more you lose yourself in the process. So ask yourself this, are you being measured or are you being valued? Because if someone's love is contingent on a scoreboard, you're not in a relationship. You're in a competition. And the only way to truly win that kind of game is to walk off the field. At first glance, a narcissist can seem incredibly attentive, even seductive. They listen intently, mirror your emotions, remember little details, and make you feel seen in a way that's disarming. It's easy to mistake that for connection, for intimacy.